Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Elias Ulema. I'll be so I think now we can start, as can see participant as 33. Well, today we are going to have a session on introduction to research, and our facilitator will be Dr. Tony Liwa. So by starting introducing him through his biography, Dr. Anton Liwa is a medical doctor, pharmacologist, and clinical epidemiologist, whereby of his 15 years of teaching career, he has been working as tutorial assistant, assistant lecturer, and lecturer, and now a senior lecturer at the Department of Clinical Pharmacology, School of Medicine at the Catholic University of S&R Science course. He is also visiting lecturer of clinical pharmacology at the University of Dodoma. He obtained a degree of medicine from Herbert Kairuk Memorial University at Dar es Salaam, 2004, Bachelor of Medical Science and Master of Medical Science Pharmacology from Stellenbosch University, South Africa at 2008 and 2012. Masters of Clinical Immunology from Cornell University, USA, 2015, and a Doctor of Philosophy from Department of Physiology and Pharmacology at Calgary University, 2020. At course, Dr. Ton serves at various capacities. He is the department chair in the Department of Clinical Pharmacology and member of ESCO and Research Review Committee, member of Higher Degree Committee, member of Admission Committee, and the coordinator of undergraduate research. He also serves as the president of University Convocation, and a currently supervised 3 PhD candidates and 2 master students and a number of undergraduate students. He has done research and published numerous papers in many areas, including pharmacokinetics, pharmacokinetics of anti-TB drugs, use of herbal medicine, hypertension, and role of prostaglandin receptors in gestation labor. So, with that brief introduction of Dr. Tone, I would like to welcome him to start our session. So, Dr. Tone, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so you're welcome. You can start now.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. So how much time do we have? Maybe I can just need to take some protocols here. Do we have 2 hours? We have got 1 hour.
Well, we have got 2 hours, and we have
Okay.
used the 5 minutes up to now.
Oh, okay. I think I have something like 70 slides, so I think 2 hours will be more than enough for discussion left afterwards. Okay, so welcome everybody, and congratulations to the organizers of these kind of platforms, because this is important for your development, especially when you are coming to the later years of your education, you need to do some research as the requirement. Actually, it's not only a requirement right now. Right now, actually, it's a subject. So you need to score. Otherwise, you are going to end up with supplementary, and this is going to delay your provision of your degree. So yeah, so today I'm just going to give you just a introduction. So let me go to the next slide. I would like all of you guys to understand the key issues that you need to consider before you start conducting your research, and during conducting your research, all the key issues which you need to put them into considerations. Also be able to describe what is your research, what is your research trying to achieve, and explain why you are pursuing it. So these are key learning objectives for today. Otherwise, I'm not going to give you details on each area, what you are supposed to be doing. I'm just going to give you an overview, each steps until the end. At least you can get the bigger picture. And then the later presentations, everyone will come into certain area and give you the details about it. Okay, so research broadly refers to the search for knowledge, because people will be wondering why are we doing research? Okay, so what you're trying to get is to get knowledge. There are problems, especially in medical fields, which still need answers. So you are doing research to bring that knowledge out. And of course, it will be your responsibility to share with your colleagues. It could be your peers, it could be your fellow students, and everybody else. So research is a scientific or systematic search for pertinent information as what is seen in your topic. In fact, research is an art of science of investigation. See, when I'm talking about an art, it's not like you are supposed to follow certain rules. Sometimes you can bend some rules to make yourself that as much as comfortable. And of course, some people, they find it much easier to do research compared to the other. So if you see you are much comfortable doing that, that means you are you're mastering that art compared to other people, because we see lots of people struggling a lot, especially getting all these concepts and be able to produce the final results. Okay, so you need to discover answers to questions through which they affect our society, affect our academia, and you don't just do it like that. You have to follow scientific procedures which are acceptable, and if everybody comes and read about it, we'll be able to say, okay, there is nothing I can argue with this man, because you've followed procedures which are standard, which are required, and of course the results will not be questionable unless if you do other things which were not supposed to be done. Okay, so the key objectives when you're conducting a research, okay, you're trying to access to the new facts. That is one. Okay, so we've got facts now and they keep on changing. So you can only do that if you bring some new evidence, some new information. Then you can say what your previous understanding was actually not right, and what I'm bringing it now is actually a new fact. And of course, these most of the time have been changing, even in practices. The practice can change because of the facts which you can bring out of your research. You can give scientific description. Okay, so you describe the body of knowledge, understand what is the key, what are the key issues, and you can provide it scientifically, systemically. Sometimes some people, they've done research, but by using different method, you can come with another method and you can say why this method is much better compared to the previous one. So you can give that description to your research. Then you can focus the future. Okay, so for example, I can give you a real life example. We had a COVID a few years back. Okay, so by doing research, you can even say what the future looks like. So for example, they came up with different variants of COVID virus. And actually they predicted that, okay, the newer the variants which are generated now by the virus, they're actually less virulent compared to the previous one. So they could predict the future that, okay, now we don't have to worry that much about this virus because we know the current variant is not that virulent compared to the previous one. You can provide logical solutions to problems. Okay, and this is key because some people, they think just doing research is just to give results and go away. Okay, so if you do it very well, if you come with the good questions, you can provide solutions to many, many problems. Okay, so when you're designing your study, when you're funding a topic, try to think like, what kind of solutions can I bring? And of course, what you need to do is just bring your evidence, and people will follow, and you can provide those solutions. And of course, you can innovate, and you can renew older practices, older scientific evidence. You can all bring new information, and the body of science can change. Okay, so you can look at that cartoon there. Okay, so look at this gentleman here. Did some research, discovered something, but things are not going on his side. For example, he decided he discovered a certain disease. So he thought maybe it's going to be very famous if this disease is going to be, everybody's talking about it, but people are not talking about it anymore. Okay, so you can see here what he's saying here, that ever since I had a disease named after me, people seems to keep their distance. So those kind of issues, which of course comes within the science. Okay, so research studies have got many types. Okay, in order to gain familiarity with phenomenon, to achieve insights into it. So this could be exploratory or formulative. It could be descriptive research studies to describe accurately the characteristics of particular individuals, particular situations, and so forth. Or it could be diagnostic research studies. Okay, so those people are doing BMIR, people are doing medical laboratory. Okay, so this is the era. They can test their diagnostic usefulness of their tools and so forth. So it could be diagnostic research as well, or it could be hypothesis testing research studies. Okay, so hypothesis, you have to say, what do you think the situation is? And then when you do hypothesis testing research, you can prove it, or you can nullify it, saying, okay, whatever you were thinking, it is not actually the case. Okay, so if you're conducting a hypothesis-driven study, you predict that something will occur, and then you can prove it, or you can disapprove it at the end of the day. So that is called a hypothesis testing. So let's look briefly at descriptive research. So descriptive research includes surveys and fact-finding. So it's like you're going to the field and you do surveys. You collect all the information, you bring it together, and then you determine what is actually available there. What is the situation at certain area? So for example, you're going to this certain district to to survey about cholera. Okay, so you go there, you collect, you do the survey, you collect all the data, and then you can see, is the cholera there? Is it not there? What is the factors which are associated with that cholera? Are the people got toilets? Do they have running water in their houses? All this can be surveyed. You can just bring all that information, and of course, you can give results about that. Okay, so the main characteristics of this kind of studies is that you don't have a control. When you go to the field, you just get information and you bring it back as it is. There is no way you can manipulate like other studies, like experimental studies. Experimental studies, you can do all sorts of things to control the study. But here you don't have a control. You just go there, collect all the variables, collect all the information which you needed to collect, and that's it. And you come here, you analyze, and you give up the results. So look at this example here of descriptive research. Okay, so somebody might be looking something like parents' experiences and opinions of inclusion of their autistic children's mainstream education in primary school. Okay, so in this way here, you just need to go to the parents and see what their opinions. That's it. So their opinions are the ones which you're going to describe at the end of the day. There is no way you can manipulate this kind of data. So that was just an example of type of descriptive research that somebody can think about. You can have analytical research. So in analytical research, the researcher uses facts or information which are already available, analyze these to make the critical evaluation of the material. So this is like you're using the secondary data. Okay, you see some people that are using secondary data to, let me correct something here. Something came out, I needed to remove it. Can you see the new window which is popped up in my screen?
No, we can see it.
You can see it?
Yeah, we can. We can't.
You can't. So you just see the slides?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's good then. Then that means you don't have issues. Yes, so you've got analytical study whereby you can go to secondary data, find this data. For example, you go to CTC. CTC is the care and treatment clinics for people with HIV/AIDS. You can go there. The data is already there. They've got records. They're keeping records. Okay, so you can go there, collect the data and see, analyze the data and see how this information can give you certain kind of results. I mean, these results can give you some sorts of information. So you can be able to collect those kinds. So those are analytical. You find the data is already there, you analyze them, and you can give conclusion about it. Okay, excuse me a little bit because I can't forward my slides. Okay, it's moving now. Okay, give me 1 minute because this thing here is giving me hard time. Okay, it's gone now. I think I'm gonna share it again. Give me a minute. Something went a bit wrong here. I need to share my screen. Right. I think I'm back. Just bear with me. Okay. Now we can go ahead. Also, we have got applied research. So this aims at finding what are the problems facing the society. Okay, so you gather the knowledge for knowledge, which is you can call it pure, or you can call it basic. So basic pharmacology, for example, I can deal with animals. I can do experimental animals to be able to produce some findings, which of course are going to be very pure, and they're going to be very basic about it, about everything what I'm trying to study. Also, we've got qualitative research. So maybe I can remind you, for your stage, we don't encourage you to do qualitative research because it has got lots of techniques. And this is all about determining the attitude and opinions of of the population in which you need to study. Okay, so this usually determines attitudes and opinions. So it is usually designed to find out how people feel. How do they think about a particular situation? So usually you have to form like a focus group discussion. You call lots of people. For example, if we've got an issue at course, at campus, I can call a group of people and they can hear their opinion. Okay, if we are talking about health issues within the campus, okay, so I can call a group of representative of the people who are living in campus, and I can see what's the opinion about a certain situation. Or I can bring some people and I can learn their attitude. Okay, do you want something? You don't want something. Why you don't want it? So you get in details all this information, and then you can create some themes. You can create some issues which were discussed during that interviews, and of course you can analyze. You can transcribe those data. You can analyze and produce your results, of course, and you can give conclusions at the end of the day. So if you're thinking of doing this, please don't, because this one needs special skills to be able to do that. Okay, because it has got lots of theories to be able to do that. If you have one session of about qualitative research, probably you'll get the details about it. But if you're thinking of choosing a research area now, don't do qualitative research. Also, we've got empirical research. So this is empirical research is the data-based research, and also experimental type of research. So such research is characterized by experimental control over the variables. So you do deliberate manipulation when you are doing that research. For example, when I was doing my my PhD, I was treating tissues with the prostaglandins. So I was harvesting tissues from uterine tissue from animals, and I was giving them different concentrations of prostaglandins to see if they can contract or they cannot contract. Okay, so I was manipulating those variables to see issues like what kind of doses can give much more contraction or not. So these are kind of the data, kind of research whereby you have control. You can manipulate and see that manipulation. What does it give? You must have a reason first before you start doing those kind of manipulations. Okay, you can have one-time research or longitudinal research, field setting research or laboratory research, or you can have simulation research, okay, using computers, clinical or diagnostic research. So for you guys, I will see majority of you probably will be doing clinical research or diagnostic research, depending on which area you're interested with. Also, you can do historical research or conclusion-oriented research or decision-oriented research. So if you've got a conclusion already, and then you want to prove it or disapprove it, so you can be focusing on that line of thinking. Okay, so before you conduct your research, you need to follow certain steps. So one of the steps which you need to do is producing a proposal. Okay, so this proposal is the one which is going to be guiding you. Okay, so this proposal is going to be studied by your peers. In case for you guys here, you are doing this for completion of your studies, it has to go through examiners. They will read it. They will see if does it make sense or it doesn't make sense. You will have to defend it according to what you've been thinking. Okay, so writing a very good research proposal is key at this stage, especially if it is a subject you need to get marks out of it. So you have to make sure that you write a very good proposal, which first is going to give you a very good mark, and then it's going to give you a very good guidance to make sure that you complete your research without having any problems. Because if you don't write your proposal very well, we anticipate that you are just going to end up with lots of problems. For example, I've seen people struggling with population. you design your study while sitting in your bedroom. You don't know how many patients which you need to study are there in the clinics. Okay, so you think, okay, I'm going to study people with colorectal cancer, but you don't know how many they are. So you write your proposal, you finish it, you decided to go and start collecting data. In sample size calculation, you said, okay, for me to make meaningful conclusion, I need a minimum of 150 people. But when you go there, you find there are only 20 people. Okay, so you're already stuck. And of course, if you say in the proposal that my conclusion will be solid if I've got the minimum of 100 people, and you come back, you said, okay, I've collected data for only 20 people, nobody's going to understand you. Okay, so in the next few slides, I'm going to take you through on an overview on what should consist in the proposal. Okay, so in any research, call it epidemiological, call it whatever you like. Okay, you need to have that proper proposal written. Okay, written, because if it's written, it's already an evidence. You can't say, okay, I didn't mean that, because you've already written. So it's like a blueprint. It's like you're building a house. And another thing which you need to bear in mind is that because it's the blueprint, that means if somebody else take the same proposal and conduct the study in the same population, the results are going to be the same. Okay, and that person which you need to give that blueprint, that proposal, actually is not supposed to have any issues to conduct that study, because it's supposed to be clear. It's supposed to have all the details, whereby when you start up to the end, it should have all the details. That means even if you give it to me right now, I can conduct that study without any issues. Okay, once again, writing is both is an art. So some people, they find it a bit difficult to write. Some people, they end up copying and pasting, which is a very bad thing. So you need to practice. You need to keep on writing, and you have to learn how other people they're writing. Okay, and a good research proposal should be based on scientific facts and on the art of clear communication. So you find you mix between the facts which are already. That's why we're doing things like previous literatures. You read other people. What did they find? What are the gaps? What did they see? Okay, what did they miss? Okay, so by mixing that, you can write it by using a very clear communication. Don't use jargons. At this stage, you don't benefit anything by writing very technical terms or jargons. Okay, so you have to communicate very clearly. When you stand up and start speaking, everybody understands what you're talking about. But if it is too complicated, people will ask you lots of questions because they want to get the clarity from whatever you're trying to present. Okay, so it is important that you guys learn to write a very clear communication. So what is the research proposal? So this is the statement of intent. Okay, what is your intention? Okay, so it could be academically prepared to complete whatever you are trying to complete. For example, you guys, you're trying to complete your degree. Okay, and who's going to be your audience? You are writing for who? Okay, so it could be your peers. Okay, but for you guys, I can say that you are writing for examiners, because at the end of the day, you need to be given a marks. So the way you write the proposal, the way clear the proposal is, the examiner is going to be happy, and of course, it's going to give you a good mark out of it. Okay, supervisor is going to be there. Supervisor also, if that study is well thought about and it is very good, supervisor also needs that to publish. Okay, so for example, you and your supervisor do a very good job about certain proposal. You collect data, you analyze it, and then you write a very good paper. it's going to be your name and your supervisor's name on there, okay? And nobody else. You can't write your girlfriend or anything, unless if your friend or if other colleagues had a very good contribution about it. Otherwise, you're not going to put the name. It's going to be you as the first author, and then your supervisor as the second author. That's it. Okay, but as I said earlier, that for you guys, you're writing it for examiners, so make sure that you write it a very good one to make sure that you get your A, which of course is going to increase your GPA and so forth. So a research proposal is your plan. Okay, so it describes in detail your study, what you are trying to do. Okay, and the decision about your study are based on the quality of the proposal. And of course, before we allow you to continue with data collection, you have to get approvals. Okay, and I can tell you right now, the process we have at KUHAS at the moment, you will be examined by several examiners several times, and you'll be allowed to write your proposal. After writing a proposal, it will go through an overseer. An overseer will be looking at your proposal and see everything, formatting, everything is in there. There is no errors, there is no misinformation, and those kind of issues. Okay. After that, if overseer approve, I mean your supervisor approves it, overseer approves it, it has to come to ethical clearance, and this has to come to me. Okay. So I will approve it if I see everything is okay. Okay. If something is wrong about it, I'm just going to put my red pen in that proposal, and you are going to rewrite it again, which is not going to be good for you because you have to write it again and print it again, which is going to be very costly for you. Okay, so bear in mind that you will get approved by certain stages. So make sure that if you write a very good proposal, nobody's gonna put a red pen on your proposal. So if you print it once, and then it's just going to be that copy which is going to get the approval. So you'll get approval. You don't have to present to the ethical board, but you'll get the approval, and then that approval, ethical approval, is the one which will allow you to go and collect the data. Okay, so what is the importance of research proposal? So this is a contract between you and your committee. Okay, one of the things is that it serves to protect the student. If the committee which examined you said this is good enough, there is no way they can come back and say, okay, you didn't do this, while they've already seen it. Okay, so they cannot demand the additional requirements because they've already said okay to it. Okay, so it protects you as well. Or it can protect the committee from the students. Some students, they've got issues. Okay, some students, they just want to produce, they just want to finish. Okay, so because you wrote it and it is bad, and everybody can see that it is bad, of course, it protects that committee. Okay, so please, for you guys, make sure that you are a good student. You write something which is tangible, and of course, everybody will be happy about it. Okay, so what are the essential ingredients about on the proposal? Okay, you've got the issue. So what does the problem your research address? So that is key. Okay, because before you start developing a proposal, you have to come up with a title, and that title have to reflect what is the problem. Okay, that's your research going to address. Is it going to address the issue of malaria? Is it going to affect the issue of cholera? Is it going to address the issue of mental health? Or which area do you think needs some more information to make sure that your conclusion, of course, is going to bring something to increase the body of knowledge? Okay. The next thing is the research design. How are you going to conduct that study? Okay. So how would the research achieve its objective? Okay, that's the research objectives. Like what kind of study design are you conducting? Is it a descriptive? Okay, is it cross-sectional? Is it a case control study? Okay, is it randomized, and so forth? Okay, so you have to know what is the problem, how are you going to do it, and what benefit are we going to get out of it? Okay, because some studies, they don't give any benefit. Okay, because at the end of the day, you have to ask the student, so what? Okay, you're doing this study, so what? Okay, so you should be able to say, at the these results probably is going to help in 1, 2, 3. For example, if you have issues of mental health among students, okay, and nobody cares about it, okay, if you bring those results showing that, okay, the prevalence of depression is very high, of course, even the VC or the management can say, okay, we need to do something about it. And that something it has been substantiated by your results. Okay, so you have to provide benefit out of your research. Okay, so the proposal makes, how do you make the proposal? Okay, so you have to outline the steps in your proposal research. You have to provide yourself with the intellectual capabilities. You have to be creative. Okay, so we have this problem right now. People are copying other people's ideas. Okay, that's why before we allow you to start writing, at the stage of your title, we ask you to go to the library, to the core system, and check if this study has already been done or not. Okay, so if we see that it has been done, we're going to say, no, don't continue with this title, because we are sure that you are going to copy from other people's ideas. So be creative and create your own study. Justify your research. Okay, what is the importance of it? Okay, so you have to say, okay, I've read 1, 2, 3 papers, all are requesting for more study to be done on this area. Okay, so for example, people, they've been doing about depression among medical students. Okay, but they came to realize that people came from high school with that kind of depression. Okay, so they can say, okay, I think we shouldn't focus more on medical students. We should focus on high school students. Probably the problem is there, so they've got depression before coming to medical school. Okay, so you have learned from other people's conclusion. Now you can say, okay, I think I can go back and see if this problem exists with the high school students and so forth. Okay, so justify why you think you need to do this kind of study. Okay, think through your experiences and think through your experiments. Okay, so think about it. And if you think, it's much easier for you to be able to defend, because people will be asking questions. And if you didn't think through about it, you won't be able to answer, you won't be able to defend whatever you're proposing. Okay, you have to anticipate potential problems. Okay, so there are many potential problems that can arise during research. Sometimes it could be time. You're proposing a study, but that study, to be able to be completed, it needs 3 years, and you've got only 6 months. Okay, so you have to anticipate and think, say, okay, I can't be able to do this kind of study, because it will need a lot of time, or it could be very expensive and you don't have the funding. Okay, so resources. If you don't have resources, that means you won't be able to complete that study. So you have to anticipate that. Okay, do you have enough participants who are going to give you that data which you need? If you don't have participants, or does the type of study, is it very sensitive? Because there are some studies, when you start asking people, everybody will be shying away, saying, okay, I'm not doing that. So for example, if you start bringing issues of homosexuality, okay, some people can be sensitive and say, okay, I'm not answering your questions. Okay, So anticipate those kind of things before you embark yourself in writing. And anticipate a realistic timetable. So for you guys, it is very, very important because you've got a very limited time to be able. You have to remember you're also doing other studies, other subjects at the same time. Okay, so for example, if we ask you to go and collect data during the long vacation, you should be able to do that. If you don't do that, you'll end up with problems because when you come back, you start rotations, you start going to fields, I don't know, this and that, and then you'll have lots of problems. So anticipate realistic timelines. Okay, so how do you get started? Okay, so know the requirements. So right now, I would like to tell you that when you go to university website, we have a guideline for undergraduate research proposal writing and undergraduate research report writing. We've got the guideline, it is there. Okay, it's like, what is the format of the proposal do we want you to write? Okay, so if you go there, go to academics, go to research. When you open that tab of research, you'll find those guidelines are there. Okay, because they're different universities, different institutions, they have got different guidelines. So if you copy from other people's what they did, probably they're totally different from what we want. And if you don't follow the guidelines which we say you need to do, you're just going to push you one step back yourself. Okay, because I'm just going to put you in my red pen and then you have to write it in a correct order. Okay, so examples, it could be we need an outline, title, then outline. Some people, they don't want outline, they just need a background. Okay, some people start with the literature review, some people start with problem statement. So you go there and read, see what do we want you to do. Okay, so for example, this one it looks like more what we want from our university, this one on the right. So we usually put title, background, problem statement, aims, or objectives. We don't want you to write hypothesis because sometimes can be difficult for you to be able to put your head around it. Okay, rationale, methodology, okay, time plans, resources, budgets, outcomes, and of course the reference at the end. Okay, but this is just an example on the guidelines. So this is not a complete guideline. If you want a complete guideline, you just go to the university website and you can find it. Okay, so you start with the title. Okay, so this should be clear, should be concise, should be subjective. Okay, so for example, you do experiences with the telehealth services during COVID-19 pandemic. That is the title which explains everything. Okay, so this guy, what he wants to do is just to look at the experiences of telehealth services. That's it. Okay, when during that COVID-19 pandemic. So this, of course, is outdated, but this was the title, and of course, it's very clear. Everybody knows what you're trying to do. Don't bring too long title because people will get lost before even finishing the title. Okay, and potential issues on the formulation of the title. Sometimes people bring the wrong answer to the right question. Okay, or they can bring the right answer to the wrong question. Okay, so you have to be very sure what you're trying to, what is the problem, the way you design your study, you're going to get the right questions about that issue which you are trying to deal with. Okay, so for example, look at this cartoon here, what this guy is trying to study. Okay, so he did study and then he came with the conclusion that medical researchers discovered that the leading cause of death by aging is due to birthdays. Okay, so what was the question and what is the answer right there? Okay, so it should be strict, it should be focused, that you know this question I'm asking right now is going to get the answers, and that answer which I'm going to bring is going to be the correct one, is going to be the right the right answer which people are looking for. Okay, so you have to introduce. You have to introduce, and introduction usually followed by background. Okay, so you have to describe the problem that you are proposing to be studied. So you produce that, you introduce that problem that you need to study at this area here. Okay, so this is like a setting stage. You're setting stage. If I read this background, I should know what is the problem, what is the gap, what is the reason you are doing this study, and what are you anticipating to see. Okay, all this should be in the introductory section. Okay, so in the introduction, you have background. You have to describe the problem statement, rationale or significance of the study. Why is it significant? You have to put the research questions for your case. If you're more advanced, you can decide to put a hypothesis, but I won't encourage you to put a hypothesis. Just put research questions. Okay, and then after that, you put objectives. Okay, and these objectives are divided into broad and specific. That broad is going to be big enough, but you need to break it down so as you can get specific ones. Okay, so the background should be not that long, should be short, about 1 to 2 pages or 1.5 pages. Okay, the problem should be stated in such a way that its importance and relevance, everybody can see about it. Okay, so everybody who reads it can see there that, okay, this person is looking at this kind of a problem. Okay, so as I told you earlier, that there should be a problem. Okay, so if there's a problem, you must give a statement about that problem. Okay, so in short, okay, you have to describe, so what? Okay, so why, so what is it important to do this kind of study? Okay, so for this problem statement, you need to give the blueprint for your literature review. For example, what is the current information do we know about this problem? Okay, so focus your committee at the beginning so they know what is it, and keep them on track throughout your proposal. Okay, they should know this person is looking at this kind of a proposal. Okay, so look at this. This statement. You can just read this statement, what it says. Okay, so in the statement, problem is not like two pages or 1 page. It's just one statement, and we encourage you to put references. For example, if this information you're getting it from somewhere else, you have to put references in here. Okay, so for example, this guy here is talking about malaria. He's saying that malaria remains the most devastating conditions, particularly in Africa. One of the reasons is that the parasites causing the disease, they are now becomes resistant. Okay, so if this malaria become drug resistance, that means we need to devise alternative strategies to target these parasites. So he has already said what is the problem, okay, and what should be done to solve that problem. So that is, in a nutshell, that is a problem statement. Okay, so it will depend on which area you guys are dealing with. Rationale is just justification why you are doing this, why is it important. Okay, so state the reasons why you choose the topic, state the significance, and mention that this what this study intends to fill. So some people I've seen, because I'm sitting in the ethical review committee, so I see lots of people. Some people that are just doing research, their rationality is because of their convenience. Somebody saying, okay, I'm going to study about certain issue in Kigoma. The reason he's doing that in Kigoma is because he's living in Kigoma. It's not because that problem is more in Kigoma than in Tabora. Okay, so you're asking them, why are you doing Kigoma and not Tabora? Or why are you doing it in Kigoma, not Mwanza? Saying, oh, it's because I'm coming from there. No, that is not scientific rationale. That is not scientific reason. okay? You have to say that, okay, I'm studying this topic because in Kigoma, we've already shown that we've got a high prevalence of certain condition. So we want to see what are the factors which are associated with certain condition. Okay, so that is scientifically sounding that, okay, this guy is going to Kigoma because this problem already exists in Kigoma. It has not been solved yet. So he's going to gather more information, which of course, it can help us find the right solution. Okay, so for example, research questions. Research questions, these are the questions which you need to answer. Okay, so for example, this guy is asking, what effect does daily use of Twitter have to the attention span of 12 to 16-year-olds? Okay, so he's trying to see social media, how is it going to affect the teenagers? Okay, so these questions that study research aims to answer. These questions should be addressed an issue or the problem, and this question should be answered at the end. Okay, when you give the conclusion, this data which you have collected should answer that original questions which was already put at the beginning. If it supports or it's not supporting, but should answer that questions which you have put at the beginning of your study. So after putting research questions, you have to look at the literature review. So this area, actually, lots of people getting lots of problems because they don't know what to put in their literature review. Okay, so in a nutshell, is that this section reflects the extensive review of literature done by investigator. So for you guys, we ask you to give us a minimum of 10 literatures. Okay, for masters, we request them to give at least 50 literature. So you have to read. You have to read, but not copy and bring that literature here. You have to synthesize. What did they see? And you put in your own words and synthesize and put in your review. Okay. So in this section, what is already known about the topic should be written. Okay. Not just quoting the literature. Okay. So if you copy, it won't help you. You have to describe. Okay. For example, you are doing a study on tuberculosis. Okay, you have to describe what is already known about that area of your research. What is known about TB already? Okay, and it is important to make it coherent, relevant, and easily readable. Okay, do not put lots of statistics. Do not put lots of numbers in there. Okay, you have to describe it, saying, okay, in this area, literature says 1, 2, 3, and everybody talked about this, but they did not talk about this, and so forth. Okay, so in that way, it will help the investigator to gain a good knowledge in that field of inquiry. Also, it will help the investigator to have insights on different methodologies that could be applied. So, for example, which methodology did they use? Okay, did they do cross-section? Did they do surveys? What did they do? Okay, so if you already know what kind of methodology they use, you can copy it if it is strong enough. If it's not strong, then you can say, okay, these people use the cross-sectional. I'm not using cross-sectional, I'm using case control, or I'm using double-blinded randomized study, and so forth. Okay, so you can improve, you can repeat, but you're using different methodology compared to what other people they've done. So literature review is not just a summary of literature. Okay, so the literature should support your hypothesis. What do you think about that situation? Should extend the previous work. What other people they've done? So they've done, they ended up here. Now you continue from where they ended, and you continue further forward. Okay, it will also help you to avoid previous mistakes, because they will say what their shortfalls on their study which they've published. So you can say, okay, they came across this kind of problem. I'm not going to repeat the same mistakes. By reading, you'll be able to say to avoid these kind of issues, and it should be unique to previously followed path, not copying exactly what other people they have done. Okay, so if you put it in a pictorial, you see that you need to start broadly, and then you have to stream it down. Okay, so if you look at that peer, you find that you need to start with the narration of the good research review. So you start very broadly, and then you have to squeeze it down to be more focused. You start broadly, and then you focus, direct strictly to the area of your research. So broadly, you have to describe what other people already know. Okay, so if I read your proposal, you start telling me something which you probably already know. Okay, so you tell me that malaria is more prevalent in Tanzania. It is more prevalent in coastal regions because of the heat temperature, all those kind of information. Then you start focusing down. Okay, so you start going down. Now you're telling me things which maybe I don't know. Okay, so you go further down and say, okay, there are different types of mosquitoes which are found in Mtwara, but you can find them in Songea, those kind of issues, because you know that general population, they don't really do those kind of things. Okay, so you start with the what reader knows, and then you go to reader, what reader doesn't know. Okay, so you start introducing at the top the topic. So if you're talking about malaria, you start to give generally an overview about malaria. Okay, you just give that a broad focus about malaria, epidemiology, for example. What's the epidemiology about malaria? Then you start focusing on certain aspect of your field of interest, what your topic is talking about, what your research problems, what your research questions. Okay, now you start focusing on those areas. If you're talking about resistance, you focus on resistance. If you're talking about parasites, you start focusing on the parasites. Okay, so for example, this guy is talking about the life cycle. He's now starting to focus on the life cycle of malaria. Okay, now is looking at the life cycle, is looking at the trends of the current control. Okay, and then at the end, you come with the gap. Okay, you already know the overview, you already know life cycle, you already know. Now you tell what is the gap which you guys need to study. Now you're talking about resistance. Now you start focusing, writing about the resistance. Okay, so the purpose, the final point is your purpose. So the purpose can be framed as a research question or hypothesis, but you have to be conscious. So one sentence, I think, is which will do the job, and you have to give solutions to your problems. After it's a literature review, you have to give the methodology. So how are you going to do it? Okay, so in this section, you use to judge the validity of the results and conclusion. So, because if you use the methodology which is dubious, people will not be able to be encouraged by the results which you've obtained. Okay, so you have to make sure that the methodology is going to be strong enough to give the results which everybody is going to appreciate about it. Okay, so in this area of your proposal, you have to describe the instrumentation or infrastructure if it is talking about that. Okay, you have to do study groups. Okay, which study groups are you? Is it students? Is it patients? What kind of patients? Is it adults? Is it children's? Is it pregnant women, non-pregnant, and so forth? Okay, and you have to describe how are you going to access to the samples. If you're going to do children's, you have to get. Are you going to get stool? Are you going to get urine? Are you going to get blood? You have to define. You have to describe. Okay, if you're going to draw blood, how many times? Okay, Is it in the morning? Is it in the evening? 3 times, 1 time? Are you going to put the needle for the whole day? You have to give all the details. And then you have to do data analysis. So you have to explain how are you going to do your data analysis. You start with the data entry. What's your database are you going to use? Okay. Are you going to use Microsoft Excel? Are you going to use Microsoft Access? Or you've got what kind of database? And then what kind of statistical analysis are you going to do? Okay, significance tests and so forth. All these ones should be in the methodology sections. Okay, and of course you can justify your method of choice, why this is better than that. And of course you can describe if there is any pitfalls about it. Okay, and what you need to do is just to show your understanding about the principles of that method. Okay, if you're talking about cross-sectional, you have to say, if you're talking about, and I'm going to do a t-test, you have to give us some understanding about what do you do t-test. Okay, for example, you have to tell me that, okay, t-test is give me the difference between two means. Okay, if I've got two groups, that means I've got two means, and then t-test can tell me if group A is better than group B and so forth. So get that kind of understanding about all those principles. Okay, and of course, prove the feasibility of your study. Is it doable, or you are, or you can anticipate problems. In that area, you have to describe the study design. So this is a specific plan or protocol for conducting a study, which allows the investigator to translate the conceptual hypothesis into the operational one. So study design is key here, because this is just going to determine what actually you're going to get after conducting the study. Okay, so the design should be clearly stated, and the study design should be used appropriate for achieving objectives of the study. Because if you're using a method which is not going to achieve the objective of your study, it's going to be very, very difficult for people to understand your data or to believe in your data. Okay, study population or sample specifications. So it is important to describe which would be the study population and how study subjects will be selected. How are you going to randomize your patient? For example, if you are conducting a study among students, okay? In MD, one of the MD class, you've got 200 people, okay? So how are you going to select 10 out of those 200? Okay, we don't want you to go and give the questionnaires to your friends. Okay, so for example, you've got MD1 up to MD5. Each MD has got 200 people, and your population size is only 200 people. That means in each class you need only 20. You need 40 people, something like that. Okay, so how do you select 40 out of those 200? You have to tell us. You have to tell in the proposal how you're going to get them. Okay, so you can say, okay, I'm just going to look at, for example, you're saying, okay, I'm going to look at the registration number, and I'm going to take everyone who ends up with number 9. Okay, so you will not know who it is, but by that randomization, you'll be able to get all those people with registration number with number 9. Said, okay, I'm just going to pick this one. So probably these are not going to be your friends. These are not going to be your colleagues or anything. Okay, so you have to give us how are you going to do that. It's not supposed to be biased. Also, you have to give us a sample size estimation. So there are calculators of giving you the sample size. For example, if you are doing cross-sectional study, you can do Leslie-Kish formula, okay, by getting the previous prevalences. If you insert that one, you'll be able to calculate. If you don't get the prevalence, you can use 50%. And by experience, I know that if you use 50%, your minimum sample size is 380 people. Okay. So it is important to mention in the protocol what would be the minimum sample required. And of course, this is key because this has got other implications. For example, if you take too many people, this is going to be costly to you. Okay, so you need that minimum. Of course, if you go below minimum, of course, statistical power of your study is going to be affected as well. Okay, if it is very difficult, you can't get those right numbers, you can get away with it, but of course, you have to describe that the power, statistical power is going to be much, much less. You have to say inclusion and exclusion criteria. Like if you're going to study a group of MD students, what is your inclusion criteria? What is exclusion criteria? You can say, okay, first of all, it has to be a male. Okay, if you can say, okay, should be 18 years and older. You can say they should have 1 or 2 characteristics. And then exclusion, you should say why you should exclude a certain individual. Okay. For example, if you're doing a study about vaccination, attitude, and so forth, you can say, okay, I'm going to exclude everybody who has already been vaccinated about COVID. Okay. I need a male MD student studying at Kuhas, 18 and above. But I'm going to exclude somebody who's already been vaccinated. If your study is about vaccination, about COVID, for example, I'm just giving you a link. So you should have inclusion as well as exclusion criteria. Okay, this is another cartoon here. This old lady is cussing to the old man that, of course, you are a failure. They wouldn't even accept your body for medical research. Okay, so most probably here is that exclusion criteria has been applied, so they cannot take this individual to take part in the study. Okay, so you have to have that criteria, and then you can say, okay, I can't take you because if I take you, my data set is going to be meaningless. So you're saying, okay, sorry, I cannot include you in my study. So you should have that exclusion criteria. Okay, so determination of sample size is also key because it is bargained between the precision and the price, so resources and expenses that involved with the study. Otherwise, if you take too many people, it's just going to be costly, both revenues, funds, as well as your time, because you have a limited time to do those kind of research. Description of the process. So the proposal should include all the details of all the processes to be adopted in the study, how the exposures, outcomes, and other variables going to be measured should be described in detail, a brief description of how the data will be processed, and using statistical packages. If you're using Stata or you're using SPSS, it should be given. And of course, you have to give statistical tests of significance. For example, are you going to use the p-value or are you going to use the odds ratio? Okay, so you should know at what kind of study you need to use the p-value, odds ratio, and so forth, because there are different statistical tests which will give you if this study, if these results, if this comparison are significant or not. Okay, so statistics, of course, some people, they can manipulate the statistics and in their favor, okay? Because they want to see the p-value of less than 0.01. Okay, if they see it's 0.02, they can manipulate the statistics so as they can get the results which they wanted. Okay, so this cartoon here says that the statistics are in the eye of the manipulator. Some people, they tend to manipulate so as they can produce the data or the results which are in their favor because they've already anticipated this kind of data, which you're not supposed to be that. Okay, your statistics will give you the results and you're going to describe that results. And also you need to focus on ethical considerations ethics is key because earlier on there were some lots of issues, lots of problems, because let me give you one example. There was a study in America a long time ago. It's called about Tuskegee study. Okay, so it's about syphilis. So they knew that penicillin was available and it could treat syphilis, but they couldn't give it to those people because they were studying to see what are the long-term complications of syphilis. And the bad thing is they just chose Black people who were incarcerated. Okay, so they had drugs, but they withhold it in the name of research, so as they can see what are the complications which are associated with syphilis. Okay, so some people got stroke, some people got lots of complications because of syphilis, just because some people were just doing research. Okay, so we've got guidelines now which says that all the research should be voluntary. You are not supposed to force people to be part of your study. Okay, if they say no, I don't want to be in your study, then it's no. You are not supposed to be forcing them. You have to explain all the risks and benefits that are associated with the study. Okay, what do you anticipate? If you don't anticipate, you tell them that, okay, we are not anticipating any risks. Okay, you have to be confidential. Don't give the data to other people to see. Don't use names. You should not know the name of the participants of your study. And of course, they have to consent. Okay, they have to sign. So this is like a legal document. They have to sign that, okay, I've been told what this study is all about, and I'm happy to be a participant of this study. Okay, so they have to consent and they have to sign. Okay, so the consenting process should be very relaxing. There's no pressure about it. There is no money involved, because if you use money, all the people will start to be part of your participants. Okay, so if you look at this cartoon here, you'll see that this participant is under pressure. Okay, the people are just forcing him to be part of their study. Okay, so let's imagine these people are doing a clinical trial on a certain drug, which we don't know the result of that drug. Okay, so you've got the right to say, okay, I want to be the participants of this study or not. Otherwise, if you push, this is not going to be ethical. So the consent process should be very smoothly, and people should understand everything before they can sign to be part of your study. Okay, also you need to look at the time frame and work schedule. Okay, otherwise, as I told you, your time is very limited. If you don't take care of this issue, you might end up with lots of problems. Everybody will be celebrating their graduation. You will be struggling with completing the research, because before completing the research, you won't be able to graduate. Okay, so the proposal should include, we have to see that, okay, this guy is going to finish in time. Okay, all the sequence of tasks to be performed. For example, you said, okay, November and December, I'm just going to write the proposal. Okay, and you should be realistic that, okay, 2 months is enough to write the proposal. Okay, January to February, I'm going to do data collection. Those kind of, so it should be written there. Okay, or from March to April, I'm just going to be doing data analysis, and April to June, I'm just going to be writing the manuscript, okay, or finalizing the thesis. So we know that, okay, this guy is going to finish before June, and the exam maybe is July, something like that. Okay, so this usually we ask students to put it in the Gantt chart, and the Gantt chart looks like this one here, which tells you what the task, and of course you've got to indicate the dates. Okay, the dates. So that way you know that you are planning now, January and February planning, you are doing research between this, you are designing here, you are doing the implementation, follow up, and so forth. Okay, so that Gantt chart usually is very good when you put it at the appendix of your proposal. Okay, and also facilities. The proposal should also include important facilities. which is required or available. For example, we have clinics. So you can describe that, okay, we have Bugando Medical Center. It runs lots of clinics, or it runs a clinic of hypertension, which 200 people attends every Wednesday, and the 200 people attends on every Fridays. So you know that in 1 week, you have got access to at least 400 people. So we know that, of course, if you need that 100 people, you'll be able. Okay. If you are doing something like MRI, you said, okay, Bugando, we've got MRI, so all the data we get from them. Or talking about cancer, so you know that I can find them those equipments on cancer and so forth. Okay, so put all those equipments which you need on your proposal as well. And of course, personnel, in this case here, is going to be you. And some people, they tend to get research assistants. So what you need to do, those research assistants or people are going to help you with data collection. You should name their qualifications, their experiences. If it's a nurse, you should say, okay, nurse is working at this area. She has got a degree. She's done this one before. So you can say, okay, this person is going to help me with the data collection, also for all collection of samples, or so forth. Okay, so you have to indicate everything. And of course, you have to say the budget. Okay, so this will give you an appreciation of the research costs, and it will prevent you from overspending. Okay, sometimes we tend to overlook some of the issues. If you don't put them down, you'll find that, okay, now 200,000 is needed and I don't have it. But if you put it down, you know, but my total research, including contingents, I need 1 million. Do you have 1 million? I have it. Then you know that you'll be able to finish it. Okay, so you can eliminate all these things which you don't need them. Okay, so put your research budget, everybody should see it, and you have to say why you need that component. Okay, do you need to go to Igombe? I need travel money. Okay, I need to do some microscopic, I need to buy certain equipment. Okay, printing, for you guys, you need to print from the proposal to the document. Okay, so you have to put the money away for, and realistically, okay, you know that my proposal, I'm going to print it twice or 3 times. Okay, or if you're doing, for example, qualitative study, I need some consultant of language to give me some transcription of my interviews. Okay, so you have to put the money away so that you can give those interview to the consultant to give you transcripts about your interviews. And of course, if there's institutional overheads, for you guys, you don't have it. But in certain situations, you have to give some money to the institution. Okay. For example, master's students, they usually give 200,000 for their proposal when they send them to ethical committee. Okay. So you have to put that money on your budget as well. Okay. At the end, you have to have references and citations. And for course now, we encourage you guys to use Vancouver citation style, not any other. There are many citation styles. We've got APA, we've got Oxford, we've got many. But you go and see what the Vancouver study looks like. So when you abide to Vancouver style, then we don't have problems. Otherwise, I can return you because you didn't follow Vancouver style, okay, citation style. So some people, they can tend to overlook those kind of things, but they're equally important. So go and do Vancouver citation style in your proposal. Okay, so you have got internet for your at your disposal. So find the references or citations which you need, narrow down your research terms, get those papers which, of course, they are focused on your study. Choose those peer-reviewed articles, not just the articles. Some articles are just dubious. Okay, find the current literature. Some people, they usually bring their literature, and you find that is citing somebody in 1974. Talking of the literature of 50 years ago. Okay, I usually joke with my students there. They bring somebody with a 1985 reference. I said, how old were you in 1985? I said, oh, I was not born. How are you bring the literature that older than you? Okay, and of course, there's a problem of people taking citations from reviews. Do not use reviews. Please use primary literature. Use original research. If you see somebody referencing review paper, that means he's using secondary references, which is not advised. Okay, so you have internet. Please plan very wisely about how you do referencing. The outcomes should be measurable. Okay, so you will get a degree, a new patent. You get a publication. Okay, so you have to already see, I'm doing this research, what am I going to get out of it? Okay, some people are just doing research for publications. Okay, some people, they need to get an instrument, okay, a patent. Okay, or it could be qualitative, contribute to understanding to a subject, a new technology or application and so forth. So you have to oversee what are the outcomes you're going to get. You don't have to write it in the proposal. Please revise and edit typos, all the typos, and back up your proposal every day. I can give you one example. 2 days ago, this week, one of the MD5 came to my office to bring the proposal. Say, why are you bringing it in January? Said, okay, I saved it to my friend's computer, and that friend went to Mpanda and he was not picking up his phone. So he had to travel to Mpanda just to look for that proposal. Okay, so, and some people, they tend to say, okay, I'm late because my computer crashed. Okay, so please back up in your flash, send email to yourself. It's very easy. Okay, so once you finalizing writing for that day, just attach it to your email and send it to yourself. It's not gonna get lost. You just need your email to access it. Okay, and always print on paper and edit. Some people, they find it much easier when they print and read it. Okay, so it's much easier to see all those problems. Otherwise, you won't be able to see them. And use the standard font, which we ask you, usually you use 12 times New Romans, and put numbers on your page. Some people, they tend to forget. And you can lock yourself in your room and you can read it loud and see, does it make sense or does not make sense? So those are just the tips to make sure that you write something tangible. And common pitfalls, people tend to forget to put the table of contents. Okay, not connecting the proposed research to the literature review. You find those are two different things. Not enough details about methods. Yet they forget to put some what they are going to do. So you ask them, okay, you're going to take blood. Yes, I'm going to take blood. How many times? Once. How many meals? Oh, they forget to say I need 2 meals or 5 meals. And why do you need 5 meals? Why not only 1 meal? Okay, and people tend to put jargons and sweeping generalities, which is not usually not very scientific. Okay, and some people, they make a mistake on relying on the supervisor. Some supervisors don't read it. When they return it to you, don't think that it is okay. Okay, because I can tell you right now, out of 100 students who are coming to my office to get approval, the proposals have already been signed by supervisors, but I usually find mistakes within them. Some of them, they are grave mistakes. And then they've already been signed by supervisors. So imagine somebody is doing secondary data. That means it's going to the computer and to collect data, and is putting the consent form. Who's going to sign that consent form? Okay, so I see those kind of issues, and is the supervisor already signed? So do not rely on supervisor. Just work very hard to make sure that supervisor is just somebody who's going to give you some guidance. Okay. Okay, so to improve your odds, okay, improving your odds in this case here, I mean for you to get good marks. Okay, know what your evaluation criteria will be. Okay, know what the examiners are looking for. Okay, we've got the guideline which we usually mark. Okay, we are looking for certain things, so go and find out about that. Okay, start with an outline. read other people's proposal which have been approved. See how does it sound? Okay. Once you finish writing, ask others to proofread it, your friends. Okay, ask them to read it for you. Give to 3, 4 people. You'll see they come with very good ideas about it. And use diagrams to illustrate your models if you have them, and make sure that your mentor approves it before you submit. Because if your supervisor, mentor is a supervisor, if they don't approve it and you bring it to me, it's going to be a big problem. Sometimes I call them because I know most of them. And they tell me, no, I did not. And sometimes they agree with you. And then when you fail, say, I didn't want to sign for this guy, but I just decided. So you're in trouble. You'll be in trouble. And your supervisor is not going to help you that much. I can tell you right now, it's not a secret that I was an examiner. I was a chair on the previous MPH exam. And one of the students failed, that got 30 or something. Okay. And fortunately, the supervisor was there and they say, why did you sign it? Say, I was pushed to sign it. So make sure that you don't push your supervisors to write it. Okay. Okay. So evaluation of proposal, the aims, objectives are likely to be achievable in the given time period. Rationale for the proposal study is reasonable, and the scientific design is described inadequately justified. Okay. So thanking you very much. And I'll be happy to take any questions. I think we have something like 30 minutes to be able to discuss if there's any issue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tony, for the presentation. So I would like to welcome anyone who have questions regarding the session today. You can unmute the mic, then you speak out the question. You're welcome.
Any questions, guys? Okay, I see Isa. Luhaga Isa. You can unmute and you can ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor, for your nice presentation. My name is Ruaga Isa from KCMC University. I'm pursuing the Bachelor of Science in Battle Science. I would like to ask you some questions. I have just 2 questions. The first question is about the title. After that, the title should be clear and precise. So I would like to know how long the title should be in terms, maybe can it be in terms of 30 words or 20 words or 10 words, how long this title should be. And then the second question, I would like to know on the issue of the proposal here. We have passed through a lot of requirements which should be included within that proposal. So according to this some requirements I'm trying to pass through, it can take this proposal can be even 5 to 10 pages, or it have a limited amount. Thank you for that, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much, Isa. The title, you don't have any limit. Okay? So what I advise my students is all the components should be there in the title. Okay, so what you need, not too long, because if it's too long, now it becomes difficult to understand. Okay, so for example, if you put what is the problem, what is the population you need to study, and where do you study it? So those components should be there. Okay, so what is the problem? What population do you plan to study, and where? For example, you want to say I want to study about prevalence of tuberculosis among patients attending KCMC hospital. Okay, those people were coming for diabetes clinic. Okay, among patients attending diabetes clinic at KCMC. So that means you're going to study about the prevalence of tuberculosis. Is it there or not? You're going to study people with diabetes, but these people, they're attending at KCMC. So we know that, of course, this study is done in Kilimanjaro. Okay, and of course, you can say Kilimanjaro, it covers the most part of the northern region and so forth. You can describe it later on. So it make sure that it's not too long and not too short, but it should have all the components in there. That is key. And the number of pages, make sure that you don't put too many pages, because people find it difficult to read. Okay, so generally I see, depending on what area are you trying to do, but I can see that don't go beyond 50 pages. Okay, because we usually ask students to do double spacing. Double spacing can take lots of papers. Okay, if you squeeze to one spacing, those 50 pages, they can be reduced up to 30. Okay, so don't go beyond 50, and make sure that you don't put things which you don't need them. Okay, I think that is my advice to you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I see Bryson Solomon. Bryson Solomon, you can unmute your. Okay, repeat again,
okay,
Bryson.
Thank you. I would like to ask on the part of the part whereby you are required to put the consent form for the data that someone has to use the secondary data. According to the template, you are required to show that you get permission or you have a permit to take a certain data and use it. So how would it be for someone who is going to use the secondary data for that case? So what should be done in the part of consent form for the case of writing proposal? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bryson. So in research, we've got many types of permissions. Okay, so the consent is a legal document which tells you that the participants is agreeing with you to be part of your study. Okay, so that is the consent. If you don't, if you are just going for secondary data, you need to ask for a permission. That means if those data are in at Bugando Medical Center, you just need to write the letter to the director saying that, hey, look here, I need to use this data which is available in your electronic system. So that will be a permission, not a consent form. So those are two different things. Okay, any other questions?
So there is a question here in the chat box.
On a chat book. Okay, I see. Let me look at it. Okay, can I access this research after session is over? You mean the PowerPoints? I can send you the PowerPoint to the organizers, and then they can share it with everybody. It's okay.
Thank you. So, any question?
Okay, you can say anything. Okay, I see one hand, and then it.
Okay.
Solomon, are you asking again?
Yes. So you said that there is a letter that someone have to write to the
Yes.
maybe Yes, maybe a letter to DMC, to someone who is coordinating all those things. But is there any formal structure
No.
that is available for anyone who?
No, you just indicate that I will write a letter to request for the permission. That's it. In the proposal, what you need to say is that I will write a letter to request for permission to use this data from the electronic database. That's it. And then the way you write the letter, it's going to be up to you, because that is not going to feature in the proposal. Okay, Moses.
Thank you so much. I just got one question: that what are the criteria eligible for a person to conduct a research? For instance, is it a must for a student to reach maybe at the level of MD5 for him or her to be allowed to conduct a research, or maybe even a student at MD1 is able to conduct a research as long as he has got a supervisor?
Okay. So at our university, it is now a subject. Okay. So it is I think it's semester 8 for MD5, and for MD for B Farm, for example, I think it's different semester. So it is a subject right now. But for your own sake, you can start early. You can identify the advisor early. You can start slowly, and then when those days comes, you don't have to sweat anymore. Okay, so you are not going to present it until those days when we advertise that, okay, now MD5s needs to present their concept, they have to present their proposal. Okay, but you are not limited. You can start when you're MD1 or even MD3. Did you get me, Moses?
Yes, I got you.
Yeah, so you can start now. You can identify the topic, you can identify the supervisor. Again, you can start earlier on. We don't limit you.
Okay, there is also other questions in the chat box.
Okay, I see here. What are the benefits of research to the researcher? Does the researcher get any kind of appreciation for the work she has done? And what becomes after being analyzed and found useful? It is thrown away? No. Of course, when you do research, this is the Ethan. Okay, when you do research, we expect you to publish it. Okay, and everybody can access and read it and use it. For example, for you guys, you have got a room to publish it on peer-reviewed journal. If you don't do that, we have got what is called Koha system, which is online as well. It will be on the computer. So it will be in the university database. If somebody needs to read about it, can go to the Koha and see about it. For people who are working in academia, you get a promotion out of those publications. See, if you see somebody is called a professor, it's because he's got lots of publication. That's why he's a professor. Okay. For researchers who are working for areas like NIMRI, you will need to attract these grants. So if you don't publish, nobody will know you. And if you request for funds, of course, some of it will be for your own good, for your own salary. Nobody will give you any money. Let's say WHO, they want somebody to do research about cholera in Tanzania. Okay, if you said, okay, I need those $1 million to do research, they will see your background. If you didn't publish anything, they will not give it to you. But if you've got 50 publications, and some of them they are about cholera, of course they will give you those $1 million, and you'll be conducting that study. And some of the money, of course, will be going to your pocket. because you'll be paying yourself. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits when you do research. Okay, what can I access ethical clearance? Oh, ethical clearance is provided by the research office. So if you know where Luena is the one who gives the ethical. So if you know Professor Morona and Luena, their offices are side by side on level 3 of the tall building. Okay, the tall building where the IT are sitting there. So if you look for Mr. Luena, is the one who's giving those ethical clearance, but I have to approve it first. I have to put my signature to your proposal. Then you will get. If I don't put my signature in there, you don't get the ethical clearance. Okay, Hans.
Okay, thank you, Professor. So my name is Hans, MD4 at course. So my question was on the sample size. So is it a must for you to complete the sample size? For example, maybe you had a target of 500 people, then you are only able to collect for about 450 people. Is there room for extras?
Yes. You will have to give a very good reason why you didn't complete it, and of course this will affect your statistical power. But sometimes you don't have nothing. There's nothing you can do. Okay, so if it's 500 and got 450, I think that is close enough, and it won't affect you that much. But sample size, we don't want you to exceed that much, because statistics always follows those rules. So if you needed a minimum of 200 and you take 2,000, probably it's not going to help you that much. Of course, it's just increase the statistical power. So yeah, you can get away with it by getting 450, but don't propose for 500 and then come with 50. That will not be acceptable. Just to try to get as much close as possible, but the statistical power is going to be affected, and you will have to describe it, of course.
Okay, thank you.
So anyone question? So I think question, no another question. Dr. Liwa, back to you. Thank you for the session today, where we have learned a lot, and respect to work on what you have taught us today. So we thank you. Maybe if there's someone from the participant want to give a thank you to Dr. Liwa before we close the session. Anyone?
Okay, thank you very much, and you are welcome, all of you. I was expecting a much bigger audience, but it looks like some maybe they were not aware. But actually, I can encourage you that these there's one question here. Somebody's asking, please, can you repeat on a place where we publish our research? Okay, you can publish on journals. Journals, these could be international, it could be local. So you just send your paper to, let's say, Tanzania Journal of Medical Research. Okay, they can publish your study and you can access it online anytime. And other people also will be looking at it. But if you don't publish it, we've got a system at KUAS, which is called KOHA. So KOHA is controlled by people who are working at the library. So if you don't publish it, it will still be online because we are going to put it into Koha. So it is called Koha, K-A-H-A, K-O-H-A. It's available in the library. So you will take the soft copy and we can upload it on that system. But it will be better if you publish it into the journals because it will be accessed everywhere. It will just depend, somebody looking at that area, they will just type and it will just pop out. And people will know that, okay, Emma, is it Emma or Danny? Danny from Tanzania did this study in certain year and found this kind of result. They will be citing you, okay? At the end of the day, you'll be known that, okay, you've published a certain number of publications and so forth.
In addition to that,
Okay, go ahead.
In addition to that, we also have a session regarding publication. So if anyone still have no clue on how to publish the study which he or she has done, we shall talk more on that part. And it's a session which is going to be at the last, so don't worry, we shall cover even that part.
Okay, so please try to encourage other people to join these sessions because they could be very informative, and of course they can boost up your appetite on doing research. Okay, particularly for those people who are on 3rd and 4th year, because I understand right now people are doing BFARM, who are doing BMIR. I think they are on that stage of start writing a proposal, start looking for title, because if you don't start at the earlier, it could be a very stressful situation, okay? So if you start earlier, talk to the potential supervisors, they can advise you. Then you can have your topic, you can just put it aside and keep on building on that topic slowly by slowly, okay? So for example, from today, you can just take that, take a message that go to the university website and take that guideline, okay? And put on your Word document. And that you have got the skeleton. So from that skeleton, you can just put in some more meat out of it because it gives you the whole skeleton about the proposal.
Okay, so on the chat box, there is a Google form for the feedback on today's session. So I'll dare you to fill out in order to get the feedback on the session today. How was it? Where should we improve? And so on. So we have like 12 minutes to time. Maybe if there are anything to finalize, please let's do while filling the form.
Okay. I can tell you my experience with undergraduate research. Some people, I see some people, they usually run into problems just because of the misinformation, okay? So you tell them, you ask them, do you know that there's a guideline in the website? They have no idea, okay? But it's very easy. You just go to the university website and you find the guideline, okay? There is even the template to write the ethical, to write the consent form. It is in there. So you don't need to start from scratch for everything. You've got lots of resources. Okay, so when you go to the website, the same website, you can see that there is a template. How can you write the consent form if you are needed to write a consent form? Okay, so it gives you all the guideline how to write the consent form. Otherwise, you bring the consent form, which is not good enough, then I will scrap it and you go back and start writing it over again, which is a waste of time, waste of resources. Okay, so for you guys, you need to be aware of your environment on doing research. You've got lots of people who can help you. We've got lots of resources which are available to you. Okay, and a session like these ones, I think you need to encourage other people to start joining about them.
Thank you, Dr. Tony, for advice. Well, all of us, we can take a note on that. And there's someone say, okay, so the presentation will be shared on the group, WhatsApp group, and also the recorded version for this session will also be shared. So
there's one question here. Someone is asking if there's a difference between concepts. Not concept, it's concept. Concept note. Concept note is one-page thing, which you need to discuss with your supervisor and say that, hey, this is my idea. Is it good enough? And people will look at it without even wasting time, and they can tell you this is good, please continue with it. Or this is not good, please change here, change there, and then you can be good. So the concept is different from proposal. Concept is just one page idea, but the proposal is the whole thing, is the plan, is the blueprint, is like a house plan, like how are you going to do it? So they are different, yes. So that was the question from Luhaga.
okay. So is there is a question? You can just type on the chat box if you don't feel comfortable speaking, or if you're comfortable speaking, you can just unmute the mic and ask the question. So maybe Dr. Liwa.
Yes.
So okay, there is this question: why prevalence is used to determine sample size?
No, that is only if you are doing cross-sectional study. Okay, so the prevalence is the one which you get from the previous study. Let's say this study was done in Kilimanjaro, but it was done 5 years ago. If you want to repeat it and you are doing cross-sectional study, you have to take that prevalence from that study, which is nearby. So the principle is that you take the prevalence from the data which was obtained locally. If you don't get it, go for East Africa data. So if you don't find it from Tanzania, you find it from Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, somewhere around us. If you don't get it, please look at Sub-Saharan Africa, because the population probably population looks more or less the same. But don't bring prevalence from China, for example, because China and Africa, they are two different populations. Okay, so yes, for cross-sectional study, particularly for Leslie Kish formula for calculating sample size, you have to use prevalence. And there is another question here. What is the university website which we can, it is the same university website, okay? That the course, if you write course, that one will come. So go to academics and then go to research and publication. You'll find all those information in there. So you go to www.course.ac.tz. If you open it, there's some tab up on top there. You'll find one, it's written academics. If you click that one, it will take you to different departments. So go to for research and publication. If you click that one, you'll see all the resources in there. Okay, all the guidelines for masters, for undergrads, all the templates for the guidelines and citations, everything will be in there. What are the other benefits of research apart from art studies? It will solve problems. And when you solve problems, of course, you will be very happy. You'll be a very happy person. Okay. Can you imagine you do a study and you create a certain drug? Okay. I can tell you right now, it has been many years. We don't have a new drug for tuberculosis. And the current situation, all the drugs for tuberculosis are becoming resistant. Okay. So imagine you do a research and you come up with a certain molecule, let's say from a plant, which can be able to treat tuberculosis. First of all, you're going to sell that formula. You're going to be rich. And of course, you're going to be very happy and everybody's going to remember you. Okay, so there are many benefits on doing research, not necessarily only for studies.
Well, regarding the research sample skeleton or guideline, I've shared on the WhatsApp group. So if you want to access it, is on the WhatsApp group. So maybe if there is another question, we still have 4 minutes. Yeah. Thinking of another question. So we have 3 minutes to time. I think we can end here for today. Then for tomorrow, we'll be having a session on research ethics by Halima Mwaisungu. She's a lecturer here at the course, also University Mwanza. It is Mwachas, it is the University of at Bugando. So we'll be having a session on research ethics. So it will be at the same time. So be prepared for that. And I'll be sharing the link today for you to assist the meeting for tomorrow. So Dr. Tony, I'd like to thank you for your time today. Well, we have learned a lot. And thank you for the advice you gave us. So I think you can end the meeting now. Till tomorrow.
Okay. You're welcome, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you. So maybe, Dr. Tony.
Yes.
Before you go, maybe there is someone who would like to get in contact from you in order to get advice, maybe a mentorship. Maybe you can just share with them on the chat box in order for them if that is not a problem.
What is my email?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it's very easy. It's just tonyliwa@gmail.com. tonyliwa@gmail.com.
Thank you. So, guys, thank you for your time. Also, I can say this is end of today's session. Now it's about time to end till tomorrow. So, thank you.